Mrs. Newsom's entity is considered charitable. What do? I'm not sure. He can pick up the phone and call people or companies with business before the state and ask them to donate to this nonprofit run by his spouse. He has behested $4.28 million by doing this. It's just extortion. There's no other word for it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. On the road, taping the show this week. I was in Los Angeles, second time, to see the shocking scenes of child sex trafficking on Figueroa Street. You saw me talk about that last year, a couple of months ago. This time I went back with a team from the California Post. There's going to be a big story on it. They've got amazing, shocking video, pictures, and so on. So stay tuned for that. That's probably a week or so away, including my plan to do something about it. For today's show, we've got another really shocking story to bring you, which is the testimony of someone I met recently at Calvary Chapel, Pastor Jack Hibbs's church. And she told me a story of how she has been victimized by child protective services, by the family court system in San Bernardino County in California. It's an absolutely... we use these words, unbelievable. It's unbelievable what happened. You have to hear this story. It's so shocking about what this monstrous bureaucracy is doing to a mother and her children. It's just unbelievable. You got to hear this story. And Susan Shelley is here with some crazy stories from Los Angeles, more tax increases, real corruption going on with behested payments that we've talked about before, and Planned Parenthood. We're going to talk about that press conference last week with Jennifer Siebel Newsom, the governor's wife, ranting at the press for not asking the right questions at their event on Planned Parenthood. So we're going to get into all of that. But I want to start with something that really caught my attention this weekend. It's not a California story, but it was something that really struck a chord with me because, as you know, I've been in and around politics and government at the highest level. And there was a speech that I just watched, all of it, that was so impressive. I really want to talk to you about it. And remember, I've written speeches, obviously for myself, but for many other people, prime ministers, serious, high-level officials and so on. And so I just think it's really worth noting when you see a speech that is of such quality, that makes an argument so persuasively and so thoughtfully and intelligently, as we just saw. I think it's worth noting it. And that speech was the one delivered just now by our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, at the Munich Security Conference. So the Munich Security Conference happens every year in Munich. Obviously, this year, a lot of the headlines were generated by AOC, who made a complete fool of herself. She went there. Maybe this is serious. Maybe she really is trying to position herself to run for president in 2028. And so she goes there, her first foray onto the world stage. It did not go well. I'm going to get to the serious matter of Marco Rubio's speech in a moment, but just for fun, let's listen together to that clip of AOC when she was asked the entirely predictable question that so many politicians in that situation have been asked about the U.S. attitude towards Taiwan. Let's see how that went.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is, of course, a very longstanding policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
There you go. A stammering ignoramus. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You would think that you're going there specifically to show that you can cut it on the world stage, that you'd at least spend a little bit of time getting briefed on the questions that might come up, including this one, which is the most obvious question that an American politician would be asked. Anyway, Gavin Newsom was there, of course, because he seems to spend most of his time now leaving the state he's supposed to be running in order to attack President Trump. So he basically went to the Munich Security Conference, and the only thing of note that came out of that was him vowing to fight President Trump's changes in climate regulations that would lower the cost of cars in California. Gavin Newsom wants to put them up. So thanks a lot, Gavin. Really worth your trip to Munich. But let's talk about Marco Rubio, an incredible speech. And the reason it was so impressive was that it was beautifully written, but really clear as well. It made a really clear argument. And the point he was making was to explain the intellectual and policy background to this real revolution that's happened in the last few years, led by President Trump, in the attitude of America to what's going on in the world on all these different issues: immigration, trade, defense, NATO. And for so long, all of these things have been swirling around, and you get all the establishment types who don't like what President Trump's been doing, hate him personally, and they're just constantly making these kind of sweeping accusations that Trump is just wrecking the rules-based world order and all the peace in Europe for all these years, and NATO and all these fantastic things that they claim. You saw it at Davos just the other week when you had Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, making this speech that they all swooned over because he was basically attacking Trump for abandoning the US role in leading the free world and all this kind of stuff. And you get all these terms thrown around, like, isolationism and America's being isolationist and all this kind of stuff. All rubbish. But Marco Rubio put it all together in such a powerful way. And the thrust of his argument was this, that actually what the president is now doing is not trying to undermine the West or undermine all these things that have actually delivered many benefits. Quite the opposite. He's pointing out the flaws and weaknesses in all these institutions and in all these ways of doing things that have undermined the strength of European countries and in the past America, until he came and turned things around. And that actually the US wants to work with European allies in a positive direction to strengthen them. But that means that they have to do some of the work, and that you can't have a Europe that is weakened from inside by doing these things that have just resulted in various kinds of economic decline, social chaos, whether that's open borders, immigration, whether that's offshoring manufacturing and leaving communities hollowed out and mass unemployment among certain parts of the European countries, all these things. And actually, of course, spending less and less on defense and more on welfare, and so on. So he made all these points in such a thoughtful way, not in a belligerent way, attacking Europe, saying you're so ridiculous, whatever, and we don't care about you. Quite the opposite. He said, no, we really care. He had a lovely line about how we're a child of Europe. America's a child of Europe and always will be. And how much of the things that we think of as so deeply American actually came from Europe, whether that's the rule of law and our basic system of law and so on from England, so many cultural things from different parts of Europe. He talked about all of that in a very beautiful and intelligent way, but in a very strong way to make the point that actually Europe has lost its way. And you can't argue with that. You just look at the numbers, the economic stagnation and decline. I mean, not that long ago, if you compared, like 10 years or so ago, if you compared the size of the EU and the size of the US economy, it's basically the same. Now the US economy is double. I mean, it's just a really stunning relative decline in Europe. And Rubio's point was to say, yes, we are, we're being the kind of, tough love kind of guys around here. And we're saying, look, we really don't want to abandon Europe. We want to do this with you. We want to strengthen the West. And that is a thing. The West means something. The Christian heritage, the belief in free speech and all these values, and human and individual freedom. All these things that are part of the West that are under assault from these regimes. I mean, you know how many times they talk about Trump as an authoritarian. The real authoritarians, of course, China and Putin and whatever, and Islamic fundamentalism and radical Islam. All these things are the actual threat to the things that the West stands for. And President Trump is defending them and actually wants Europe to be a partner. But that means that Europe has to, shape up a bit, frankly, and follow many of the things that are working successfully in America. It was just a really thoughtful, interesting speech. The first time I've seen that whole populist revolution that, of course, I was very much part of and talked about all the time on my show on Fox, wrote books about, and so on, really articulated with respect to foreign policy in a very optimistic way. I always used to talk about positive populism. That was the intro every Sunday night to my show on Fox News, The Next Revolution. I would say every Sunday, this is the home of positive populism, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-community, pro-America. I'd say that every Sunday night. And what I meant by positive populism was, while we can legitimately critique what has gone before, the kind of the last 50 years of establishment consensus, open borders, unrestricted free trade, all of that stuff that saw the rich get richer, but regular working people get screwed in America and all around the world. Of course, we can critique the establishment consensus that led to that, but let's also, focus on the positive, on lifting up the people who've been left behind. And that's what I always try to do. Like, what are we actually going to do in the future? Yeah, we can criticize the past, but what are we going to do in the future to make sure that the working class people and families and communities have the chance to make progress, to climb the ladder of opportunity? That's positive populism, not just railing against the elites and the establishment, of course, making sure they are held accountable for what they did, but actually lifting up, especially working class people in America. And that was what I always used to talk about. I thought this speech by Rubio was positive populism applied to foreign policy, national security policy in a most beautiful way. I tell you, it is really worth watching the speech. It's about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. Check it out. It's very, very cool to see one of our leaders make such an impressive speech over there in Europe and tell the story of the Trump administration and the revolution it's bringing about in all sorts of policy areas in such a strong and compelling way. Susan Shelley joining us now with some great stories for us. Let's start with something that made a lot of headlines last week. This was the wife of the governor, what's the first partner, I think we are instructed to call her, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. Full disclosure, I know the Newsoms. The first year that I was here, I was teaching at Stanford, and a friend of mine introduced me to them. They were at college together with this person we're about to discuss, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. They were all at Stanford together. We haven't seen each other for a very long time. I don't think I'm the favorite in the Newsom household, the way I've been going after his appalling record. But I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. Let's hear what this is all. What was this all about? She started ranting at the press for not asking the right questions. But what was the whole event? Tell us the whole story, Susan.
Well, the event was a bill signing of legislation that authorized $90 million in public money to go to Planned Parenthood, grants for family planning clinics. It's aimed at funding Planned Parenthood. And it was $90 million, and the governor signed it. And this was the bill signing event, and he was going to take some questions, and she got upset that the questions were not about the topic. So I looked into it a little bit. I said, well, all right, let's see. Let's talk about the topic. Where did this $90 million come from? Well, it turns out it comes from last year's budget. But what they did is they took one of those blank bills that they passed.
Oh, my goodness.
It was another blank bill, trailer bill, piece of legislation. This passed in March 2025. It was absolutely blank, except for a line that says, it's the intent of the legislature to do something related to the budget with this bill, and the rest is blank. It goes through the committee process. It's voted on the floor. It goes into the drawer. So the Senate takes it out. And they said, well, here's a bill we passed, and they sent it to the Assembly. On January 30th of this year, the Assembly amended $90 million into it for family planning clinics and directed that the Newsom administration agencies would decide who gets the grants and how they would be apportioned. And they send the thing back, and the Senate and the Assembly pass the amended bill on February 9th. It goes to the governor's desk. He signs it in this little event on February 11th. So this is another bit of nonsense with your public dollars. They did the budget for last year already. They've got a deficit this year of at least $3 billion, maybe $18 billion, depending on who you listen to, and projected deficits up to $35 billion every year. And they just materialize money for Planned Parenthood. And totally by coincidence, Steve, Planned Parenthood was a key supporter of Proposition 50, Gavin Newsom's scheme to redistrict the congressional districts and make them more democratic. Jody Hicks was one of the people who signed the ballot argument, appeared at the events. She's the president, or the CEO rather, of Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California. And she happens, another total coincidence, to be married to the man who drew the maps, Paul Mitchell. So what I want to say here very clearly is absolutely not a payoff to that family to give $90 million to the organization that employs Jody Hicks. It's perfectly fine.
It's so incestuous, it's so corrupt. This is the Democrat industrial complex, as I've referred to it, the machine, the regime. I mean, it's just, this is what you get, this kind of corruption after 16 years of one-party rule. I mean, every aspect of it. Let's just go over it a little bit. So the blank bills thing, just for those who haven't heard that term before, I mean, regular viewers and listeners will know because you brought this to our attention right from the beginning and it keeps coming up. It's so, and this is from the people who never stop lecturing us about democracy, how democracy and how it's terrible that Trump is trashing all these democratic norms. They think it's perfectly fine to just sneak these things in. So just in terms of the process of these blank bills, it goes through the full process the first time round, completely blank.
Right.
It's put away as a vehicle for anything they want later. They bring it back out, put in the 90 million for Planned Parenthood. Did you say they have to re-vote on it? Is it just a quick, why is it different? You know, they just, what's the process?
Well, it had already passed the Senate, so they sent it to the Assembly. The Assembly did an amendment. Now it's not blank anymore. Now it's $90 million. And then they send it back. They pass it in the Assembly. They send it back to the Senate. The Senate passes it. The Assembly passes it, I think, one more time in its final form. And so on February 9th, they both voted to pass it. It went to the governor's desk.
So just to be really precise about the democratic deficit, as we might call it here, the point is that it didn't go through the 90 million, the new content in the blank bill did not go through the normal process of hearings and public, you know, that whole process. Is that the point?
Correct. There were no, this was not part of the budget process that they voted on when they passed the budget and signed it into law last year. This is a trailer bill, which is technically implementing part of the budget, but you know, where is the money? They're just spending it out of the air, and we're running deficits, which means that there's more pressure. Every little thing that they add to this is more pressure for tax increases.
Is there anything more on the 90 million that you can tell us? That's where...
That's everything out of the 90 million, but there's a little bit about the other things that Governor Newsom is doing for his wife that they didn't want to talk about at this press conference, which is the California Partners Project, which is her nonprofit. And he has behested, we've talked about these behested payments before, where he can pick up the phone and call people or companies with business before the state and ask them to donate to this nonprofit run by his spouse. And so far, he has behested $4.28 million for it by doing this. And obviously, when he makes these calls, the power of his office and what he can do is behind that request. And so this is completely legal in California as long as you fill out the forms correctly. It's called a behested payment. In other states, it's called extortion. But directly benefiting in one way or another his own family, he makes these calls, $4.28 million total.
Over what period?
I think from 2020 until now. I think it started in 2020.
The first Partners Project.
The California Partners Project.
He's also, I believe, behested payments to her other non-profit, the Representation Project, no?
I'm not sure if he has directly behested payments to that or behested payments to something else that donated to it. That's possible, like from the California Endowment or something else. I'd have to look. But definitely the money is sloshing around. And it comes from, just like the money that funds his overseas travel, it comes from these behested payments from entities that have business before the state. That's where the California Protocol Foundation is getting its money, is from behested payments. In one case, there, I think $2 or $3 million that he raised for his inaugural festivities, he donated to the California Protocol Foundation. Well, where did he get the money for the inaugural festivities? Behested payments to unions and companies and associations and everyone who has business before the state as he was taking office. It's just extortion. There's no other word for it.
The overseas travel, would that include the recent trip to Davos?
I believe so. I think the California Protocol Foundation paid for the Munich conference trip and the Brazil trip and a trip to the Vatican for a climate conference and the trip to China. And, it's the idea of the Protocol Foundation is it helps the taxpayers by funding things so the taxpayers don't have to. But where's the money coming from? It's coming from this shakedown of companies, unions, entities that have business before the state.
So the California Protocol, that's the first time I've heard that term. The California Protocol Foundation, when was that set up? Do you know?
That was set up before the Newsom administration. It might go back as far as Governor Schwarzenegger.
I know because I've just been looking into it. We have a policy paper coming out on it this week. One of the main targets for these behested payments that want to curry favor with the governor is PG&E. So I know the despised utility from Northern California, ripping everyone off with massive bills and then pretending it's all in the name of climate change, whatever. So the thing is that PG&E, I know he's done. Where do we get a list of the behested payments? Is that all published?
Yes, it is. It's all public, and you can look it up just on any search engine. FPPC, Fair Political Practices Commission, is where these reports are available. So it's fppc.ca.gov, and you can just search for behested payments. And there is a text search engine where you can type in the official, because it could be any state official. It could be legislators, it could be the governor, it could be the lieutenant governor. You can just type in the last name, and then you can also search by the payee and the payor, and it will come up. And you can also download all the data and search it separately on an Excel spreadsheet and see who's giving and who's getting and where this money is going. I had found some behested payments that the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, did that I thought were very sketchy. It's hard to know why they're giving in some cases. There have been a lot of law firms that have been behested out of their money or out of free services. What's that about? What are they getting? We know why the public officials are asking for the money. We don't really always know why these entities are paying it. And this is at the local level, too. The mayor of Los Angeles does it. This is a category of payments with no limit, no contribution limit. So it can be millions of dollars at a time, and in some cases has been. And it's supposed to be for a good and righteous purpose, either legislative, governmental, or charitable. So Mrs. Newsom's entity is considered charitable. What do? I'm not sure.
So the thing is totally corrupt. And again, they kind of hide behind it on the grounds that, well, it's all published, transparency, but no one looks at this stuff. No one really knows. And the favor is done and the debt is incurred. And that's how it works. And the fact that it's public, on some website people have to go and look up, that doesn't stop the corruption.
Well, what's really, I think, concerning about behested payments is that this is not someone seeking to buy influence. This is the public official using the office to shake down an entity that has business before the state, which I think is a little worse in some ways because it's just, there's so much of it. And what are you supposed to do if the phone rings and it's the governor and you're a union official with a contract pending and he says, I need $1 million for my inaugural festivities? No is not the right answer. And that's abusive. That's an abuse of power, in my opinion.
Yes, but it's also the other way corrupt because let's say I want to go back to PG&E. Like PG&E, definitely does these behested payments. And so you're right. There's the shakedown aspect. Newsom gets on the phone to what's her name, Paddy Poppy or whatever, the CEO of PG, and says, "I'd really appreciate it if you could support this partners project or whatever, if that's a real example. I don't know, but they definitely did behested payments. Let's just say it's that. And it would really mean a lot to me if you could do this, right? So that's the extortion. But of course, it goes the other way, because when they do it, and they say, sure, here's $1 million or whatever, then you're in good graces with the governor when you sit down the next week and talk about your regulatory issues or whatever it may be. So it's really terrible on every front. I think we should dig into this California protocol thing. Did you say Protocol Foundation?
Yes, the California
Okay.
State Protocol Foundation.
Because I was interested, like, who's paying for all this trip? Okay. I want to go back to the other aspect of that Newsom event, the Planned Parenthood event. So what she was upset about with the press was that they were not asking the approved questions that she wanted them to ask. Brilliantly pushed back on by a lot of the reporters, that Ashley Zavala, and I noticed Emily Hoven just completely mocking her for this. It got a very bad reaction. But actually, the thing that really just shows how ridiculous they all are is that she gets away with this talk about war on women. That's what she was saying. There's a war on women, and you didn't ask about, Republican war on women. And you think, well, hang on a second, aren't you the same people that passionately defend biological boys in girls' sports, for example? Isn't that you? But suddenly there's a war on women coming from the trumpet, and it's just laughable.
There's no war on women on this issue. What's happening is, since 1976, it has been federal law that federal funds cannot be used to pay for abortions. 1976. It's been continuous. And what happened more recently is in the Biden administration.
That's the Hyde Amendment.
The Hyde Amendment, correct. And in the Biden administration, President Biden signed some executive orders, or his auto pen did, and the executive orders looked for ways to get the federal government assisting in some ways family planning services, and the money could go to abortion. It was something that enabled a little more federal help. And President Trump rescinded these executive orders in his first week back in office, and then in the One Big Beautiful Bill, they made it clear that indirect funding of abortion through federal funds was not going to be allowed. And this apparently caused some defunding of some of the Planned Parenthood clinics because they were using indirect funds. So this is what they were upset about, and this is what California was going to compensate for with a blank bill from last year's budget. But it's not a war on women. It's just what federal law has been, even under the Obama administration. All along, it's been federal law. You can't use federal funds for abortion.
I think one of the things that the people reacted to from that press conference was just the sort of completely out of touch and arrogant, sort of elite regime attitude that it kind of revealed. They come, how dare you not ask about the thing that I want to, just crazy. All right, let's move on. There's another tax increase, surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise, another, quote, temporary tax increase for, quote, health care, but it's actually a sales tax increase. It's a general tax. This one comes to us from the Board of Supervisors in Los Angeles County, where the sales tax is already 9.75%, and this would take it to 10.25%. Because it's a general tax, it only needs a simple majority on the ballot, but they're telling you it's for health care to make it sound like a special dedicated tax, but they don't have to spend it on health care. They could spend it on pensions and pay raises and paneling in their offices. They could spend it on whatever they want. So this was voted 4-1. Catherine Barger was the only county supervisor who voted no on it, saying it's a general tax not dedicated to health care. So she voted against it, but it's going to be on the ballot. However, it is state law that local sales taxes can only be 2% above the state sales tax rate of 7.25%. So 9.25% should be the top. What they do to get around this is called a special statute. These county boards of supervisors lobby Sacramento to get a special bill that makes the new tax increase exempt from the 2% cap. And so that is happening. The bill for LA County is Assembly Bill 1768. introduced by Assemblyman Isaac Bryan. This will allow a half-cent sales tax for 5 years. It takes the county sales tax to 10 1/4. But already in LA County, Lancaster and Palmdale in the high desert are at 11 1/4. So this would be another 0.5%. This would take them to 11.75%. There are 42 cities where it's already 10.5%. So this would be another 0.5% on top of that. Would take it to 11. And then there are 18 cities in California, I think 11 in LA County, that are at 10.75%. So you see the problem here. Every time they want something, they say, well, it's only temporary. It's specifically for healthcare, but it's not. And this is a 5-year temporary tax. Now, a brief history of temporary taxes in LA County. November 2008, Measure R was a half-cent sales tax for 30 years to build transit projects. 30 years, that was enough, and then everything would be built and they'd be done. Except 8 years later, they made it permanent with another measure that raised the tax an additional 0.5%. That was Measure M. And then there was Measure H, the temporary 10-year quarter-cent sales tax increase for homeless services. Well, guess what happened with that? In November 2024, they made that permanent with another ballot measure. This one was going through that Upland loophole where it was a citizens' initiative tax increase, so it didn't need a 2/3 vote according to the courts. It only needed a simple majority. And so Measure A replaced Measure H with a permanent half-cent sales tax. So much for temporary. And now this new one for healthcare is supposed to be only 5 years, but guess what's going to happen? 2 years or 4 years from now, something will be on the ballot that makes it permanent and probably raises it. And this is a scam on the voters. This is bait and switch. And when they put these replacement taxes on and they're extending it, what they say is this is not a tax increase. Well, yes, it is a tax increase. It's an increase from what it would be if it went down as scheduled. But people get tricked.
It's unbelievable. And so the law, which was the law? Is this Prop 13? How does this? So sales tax is probably because this is all wrapped up in what you've been working so hard on, which is formerly the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act that you qualified for the ballot. By that I mean Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the Business Roundtable, 2024. They yanked it off the ballot outrageously. The puppet Supreme Court, because Gavin Newsom told them to, because they want their unlimited ability to increase taxes. Now you're back with Save Prop 13 this year, and that would stop some of this, right?
Well, what that would do is restore the 2/3 vote requirement. It would get rid of this exception for citizen initiative tax increases, because what the courts have said is if it's a tax increase put on the ballot by the citizens, the Constitution doesn't apply. And so you can do a transfer tax for a special purpose, which is prohibited by Prop 13, because the Constitution doesn't apply because it was a citizen's initiative. Well, that's ludicrous. That's a crazy loophole that they pulled out of the air, and the appellate courts have been widening and widening it. And now you're in a situation where special interest groups can write their own tax increase, direct all the money to themselves, get it on the ballot, and evade the 2/3 vote requirement and everything else in the Constitution, because Prop 13 prohibits transfer taxes and it prohibits ad valorem taxes, which would be local taxes based on the value of your property. Ad valorem means the value. So that's prohibited in Prop 13. But under these appellate decisions, the city of Los Angeles could work with these outside groups to collect signatures on a measure that puts a new local tax on the value of your property. And they could put that on the ballot with signatures and pass it with a simple majority. And you would have an additional local property tax based on value, which no one can control. It would go up every year with the market. This is crazy that this loophole is allowing it, which is why the Save Prop 13 Act is so important to get on the ballot. And I hope that it will. We're just about at our deadline to turn in those signatures, and I hope that it will make the ballot.
The sales tax limit, 7 1/4 state, another 2 local. Where was that?
That is in Revenue and Taxation Code 7, Section 7251.1. And that's why they can change it with special laws, because it's in the state law. It's not in the state constitution. We should probably put it in the state constitution and cap these sales tax increases because it's getting out of control. And these ballot measures are so sneaky. The one that just passed in San Jose was sold as necessary to keep public hospitals open. They have 4 public hospitals in Santa Clara County. And they said we have to have a temporary 5-year sales tax because Trump. And it's a little bit more than half a cent, a little bit more than 0.5%. And it's 5 years. And they said it's for the public hospitals. But guess what? It was a general tax. They rushed it to the ballot so it could be on the same ballot with the special election measure Prop 50, because there was going to be an election anyways. So the County Board of Supervisors rushed that to the ballot. And they said, we have to have this to keep the public hospitals open. Everybody dies if this doesn't pass. And that's how they sell it. And so the voters approved it. And interestingly, Mayor Matt Mahan said that he was kind of hesitant about it, and then he pivoted and he supported it.
Well, there you are. This is the point I was making at the debate, and I will be making it again against him, which is, he's been presented to us as the moderate Democrat, or as one of his supporters I heard on this Signal chat, where they were basically, some of the tech community were deciding to get behind him. He's the least insane Democrat, which I think we could aim a little bit higher than that. But still, the least insane. He's for all these tax increases. So he was in favor of that sales tax increase, and now he's in favor of another one for BART, the regional transportation, the Bay Area Rapid Transportation.
Right.
So he, as I pointed out, he loves all tax increases except when they're on the billionaires who he's getting money from.
And sales taxes are very regressive. They hit the people who can least afford them the hardest. So it's really bad.
This is Matt Mahan. Tax the poor, help the rich. That's basically his pitch. All right. There's a final story I want to get to, which is a quirky one, but very interesting, about how bureaucracy works in California.
Yes. Well, in the city of Los Angeles, they don't have a lot of respect in the city council for property owners. They're always impinging on the rights of landlords and saying, well, we're going to declare an emergency and you can't evict tenants, and you can't raise rent. You can't collect it. You can't raise it. You're just going to have to pay your bills out of your savings because we're going to stop you from collecting money from the tenants. And they do this all the time. And that's really a kind of a regulatory taking of property. But the landlords have not been able to win in court. So they're constantly having their property just taken from them. And there's a new case that I think is related to that, where the city council decided to declare Marilyn Monroe's house in Brentwood a cultural and historical monument. And the reason they did this, it had never been a cultural historical monument before. This is the house that she bought in 1962 and later died in, tragically. And so she was the owner of this house for about 6 months. It has never been declared historical or a monument or any kind of protected status at all. And new owners bought it in 2023 for over $8 million, and they got a demolition permit because they wanted to destroy the house and put up something else that they could rent. Well, it just became a huge controversy that they were going to demolish Marilyn Monroe's house. People got very upset, and the city council blocked the demolition by having it declared a cultural and historical monument. This means that the owners cannot demolish it, change it, remodel it, move it. Everything is either a CEQA event or it's a cultural commission event, and they need lawyers and consultants to even fix the roof. They can't do anything to it. And the city paid nothing. They took the value out of this $8 million property, brought it to zero or less than zero because they have expenses, and they didn't pay them. So the owners are suing in federal court.
They've not been compensated at all.
They've not been compensated at all, and they've had a tremendous headache from this because once they declared it a cultural monument, it goes on the map. You can find it on Google Maps, Marilyn Monroe's residence, and people are driving up and trying to see the house, which you can't see from the street. It's a narrow little cul-de-sac in Brentwood. It's a tremendous burden on the neighbors, on the owners, on everybody, that you've got tour buses coming in, tourists coming in, people climbing over the fence to try to see the house because it's a cultural historical monument like the Hollywood sign. It's somebody's property, and the city paid them nothing for it. And so they're suing over that. The city really can't do that. They can, and they did, but under the Fifth Amendment, Property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. And so really the city has to pay these people for what they've taken from them. That's the only fair outcome. And, if the house can be relocated and made into a museum, if that's what people want to do with it, that's great. But if that's a public use, they can't just take it. They have to pay for it.
Amazing. So but it didn't occur to them to offer compensation until these lawsuits have started flying, and now they may have to.
They've been fighting for a year, I believe, in state court and in these different commission hearings. They've been fighting for a year, and now they've gone to federal court.
Amazing attitude, as you say, to property rights.
I'm sympathetic to the argument that the house should be preserved as a public site, but not on the private property where it is right now.
It's amazing. I mean, all these things that just reveal this attitude of these, like the arrogance of this kind of big bureaucratic machine that we have. Amazing. All right, Susan, let's leave it there. I wanted to just make sure we ended with everyone being really clear about what they need to do if they haven't yet done so on Save Prop 13. Tell us where we are on that and what needs to happen.
Well, we're just about ready to turn in the signatures, so it might be too late. But if you want to use express mail and get it there overnight, you can go to saveprop13.com, download the petition, fill it out, sign it, and send it back to the Sacramento office of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association.
What is the deadline?
We have to turn them into the counties on the 25th of February, so we're just about there.
Do you think it's looking good, or are you a little nervous about it?
Well, both. I think it's looking good, but you never know. And the counties have to verify the signatures, and sometimes the counties have a critical look that we don't agree with, but they can say that something doesn't match, and so a certain number of signatures will be thrown out as invalid. So we always want to have many more than we need. And I'm told that we do, and I'm optimistic that it will be on the ballot in November.
It's very, very important. So just to be clear, we're taping this Monday the 16th. I don't know when people will be watching or listening, but there's still time. If you haven't done it yet, there's still time. Is that right?
Just barely. You really need to get this to the Howard Jarvis offices. Maybe if you get it there by the 18th or 19th, there's still time to get it opened and sorted and boxed up and sent. But each of these petitions has to be sorted by county and delivered to the separate counties by HJTA. So it does take a little time to do that. So you can't just drop it off yourself at the county office. It has to go to HJTA's office and be processed. So it might be too late, but if you're seeing this quickly, then if you can get it there by the 19th, that's okay.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you for all your work on that and everything else. Great to see you as always. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Steve.
So joining us now is Andrea Myers, who I met a few weeks ago, who told me her story that shocked me to the core, and she's here now to share that with all of us. Andrea, I really, really want to thank you for coming and telling your story, because when we met at Calvary Chapel a few weeks ago now, we had a long, long conversation, and it was so shocking to me. And in a way, I shouldn't have been shocked, because I have been hearing many stories about how the family court system works in California and child protective services and all these things. And I hear stories. I'm on the campaign trail the whole time, up and down the state, and it's becoming more and more clear to me what a problem this is. But there was something about your story that was just particularly shocking. I'd love you just to tell people just factually what happened.
Well, there was some domestic violence issues at home. And I had separated from my husband and obtained a restraining order. He violated the restraining order. I called the police. Police came to the home, took a report. I was threatened by police officers that they were going to call CPS. And I shut down the conversation, went back into my house, and they did end up calling CPS. My husband was later arrested that day and has since then sentenced to prison. So he's in state prison. 18 days later, the CPS people came to my home. I declined a conversation with them, exercising my constitutional right not to open my door or speak to any government person without a lawyer present. And they waited another 3 days and then came out to my home with police and broke into my home at gunpoint and held me and my children for an interview warrant. So most of us are familiar with like a search warrant. An interview warrant is not the same thing as a search warrant. A search warrant is for like criminal activity. So they came in, they did their interviews, then they gave me the warrant, they walked out, and then me and my family we were going on a camping trip that day. And so we left after that. Like we were literally walking out the door when they came. Almost getting out the door when they came, and then we went ahead on our camping trip, and then the CPS and police came to my home later to pick up my children. What they call detain my children. They came with a detention warrant to pick up my children and have them removed from my care. But we weren't home, and so they served me a detention warrant via text message, and a split to go to court. And 2 days later. So I went to the court hearing 2 days later without my children. And the judge told me that he would hold me in contempt if I did not show up the next day with my children. And so I showed up the next day with my children and had a 30-second court hearing. And they told us to get out of the courtroom. And right when I walked out, they were waiting to for me to hand over my children's. This happened in June, so it's been, 8+ months, and they're still not in my care.
I mean, tell everyone the ages of your children at the time this happened.
At the time, my youngest was 7 weeks, and then 2 years old, 8 years old, and 17 and a half.
It's unbelievable to me this has happened. So you were the victim of domestic violence.
Correct.
And they have taken your children away from you, even though is it your ex-husband? Are you separated or divorced?
We're separated. We're separated. When I originally filed for the restraining order, I did file divorce paperwork at the same time, but
right. He's in prison for domestic violence against you.
Correct.
And they took your children away from. What possible grounds did they have? Did they have to show grounds? That is just so shocking to me. What's the argument here that they're making?
So they hadn't really made a solid argument, and they said, the charge that what they're alleging is that I failed to protect my children.
From what?
From exposure to the domestic violence.
So it's your fault that your children witnessed domestic violence perpetrated upon you by your ex. I mean, this is an insane. I don't know what other word there is to use. Am I missing something? I mean,
that's what I keep asking myself all the time. But basically from what the social workers say, they want the parent to myself to take blame in and I quote, in my role in the domestic violence. And all their paperwork, it says mother engaged in domestic violence.
What do they mean by that?
Well, if we look up the definition of engaged, it's like a willful participant.
What information do they have? Is this something that your ex-husband is telling them that you did, that they're basing this on? Where's this coming from?
Well, so according to their own, policies and procedures, there needs to be a exigent circumstance for removal, right? There's got to be an imminent danger, right, for removal. With my husband being out of the picture, the source of the danger was already eliminated prior to CPS involvement. But from what I gather from their paperwork, they are using my domestic violence restraining order that I filed with family court as the proof that there was domestic violence in the home.
But what's it got to do with you? Why are you a threat to the children?
Well, so one of the codes that they use for their allegations, their, what we're more familiar with as charges, is the failure to protect. So their words is they're alleging that I failed to protect my children from that exposure to the domestic violence.
And when they say exposure, does that mean witnessing it?
Correct.
Were they physically harmed at all in this during the domestic violence?
Never.
So this is you. I mean, I'm just stunned. I don't know what to say. And again, this is how I felt when I first spoke to you, and I'm having the same sense of shock and disbelief and outrage all over again. What is your and so this and just the human tragedy at the heart of this, a little baby separated from their mother, young kid, it's just, you said you were breastfeeding, I believe.
Yes. I'm still pumping full time. It's with all the stress and the separation, it does take a toll on the whole breastfeeding relationship, and they won't allow me more time, more access, even though their own policies and procedures state that infants should be in contact with their mother daily to near daily. But I only get to see my kids twice a week.
Twice a week. That's what I was going to my next question. So right now, how is it working? What happens?
Well, the visitation is it's that monitored, video recorded visit, like third-party visitation site. So there's a monitor sitting at the door, video recorder recording the whole visit. I go there 3 times a week for 3 hours each visit.
Are you in a room with them all together?
Correct.
Are you allowed to leave the room or the house or anything like that?
At this particular facility, the bathroom is down the hall. So if somebody has to use, one of the kids has to use the bathroom, or I need to change a diaper, we all have to pack up and be escorted and monitored during our bathroom break.
This is so inhuman. Okay, I mean, I think I know the answer, but just for clarity here, can you go and take them to a playground and have some fun?
There's no playground there. We're just stuck in a regular room, like a 10 by 10 room.
You couldn't, for example, say, next week, it's a nice day, let's go, can I have my 3 hours in a public park or a playground or anything like that? Totally not possible. Is that right?
So usually if they allow you to expand your visitation in that way, then yes, but you have to have somebody that's willing to supervise the visit. And that if you don't have anybody to do that, sometimes you have to pay somebody, find somebody. They have to get background check cleared, license, vehicle registration, social security number. They have to provide all that information to the workers, to the social workers. And that's only when they allow it. So they have to allow your visits to expand into the community, to, be able to go to a park or a playland.
And what's the process? What's the end to this? How's this going to be resolved?
Well, I had just heard from one of my kids that the social worker had told her that they plan to return my children before the start of the new school year. So sometime after the summer.
What's that based on?
Exactly. So they want us basically, I have already done, they make you do classes, domestic violence classes, parenting classes, individual therapy. I've already completed all those. Back in August and October, I was done with those classes. But they stated that I still lack insight into my role in the domestic violence, because I have not taken responsibility for my role. So that is why they are claiming that I'm still a danger to my children.
Okay, I want to get to that in a second, but just as a matter of fact, I meant to ask this earlier, where are the children living? Is it in a foster home? Where are they? Who's looking after them?
So they were recently with just a stranger, with a foster care provider. Until about a week ago, they went, I had put in contact information for a family friend who was able to take them in. to take all my kids in. So she had to get background screened. Her home had to get checked and everything. And my kids just went to her home about a week ago.
So at least that's now a friendly face, as it were.
Right.
Well, okay. Well, that's some little ray of hope. At least that's something a little human in all of this.
Yes. I can already see the sense of relief on my kid's face, you know?
Well, I'm so happy that at least that's happened.
Yeah.
I just can't believe this. Okay, so I mean, are we missing something, right? I just want to. I'll ask you a question. I don't mean this in an aggressive way. I'm just meaning it in a kind of trying to explain this somehow. Is there something you're not telling us about what happened with the domestic violence? What are they basing this on? Because this is, to me, just an obvious example of, in the most extreme sense, victim blaming, right? And this is from a system, a bureaucratic system in a very blue state where all this, that constantly tell us that they're all, on the side of women and gender equality and all the rest of it. And here we have a female victim of domestic violence who's being blamed for the domestic violence. What am I missing here?
To me, it's the same thing. It's especially, they put you through the classes too. They put you through the classes, the domestic violence classes, and you learn about the red flags. You learn about the victim blaming, right? And to me, that's exactly what this is. They have to place blame. They have to place blame somewhere. And yeah, they want me to explain what was my role. How did I remain in a victim? What did we say? How did you remain in a victim, at the victim? What was your role? How did you damage your kid?
Oh my God.
Accept responsibility for her parts.
Who's writing this?
This is notes that I took with the conversation with the social worker supervisor that I just had the other day, asking her, because I'm having to retake the classes again, right? So these 12 to 16 week classes, I'm having to repeat them because they're claiming that I lack insight into my role in the domestic violence. And so I asked her, can you please expand on what exactly that means? Because in my mind, it's victim blaming. So you want me to take responsibility for somebody else's criminal action. Those are statements that I wrote down that she stated, that they need to be able to have me elaborate on how I remained in a victim, like as if I didn't leave fast enough.
But I mean, I don't know for how long we've been, in society and in public policy talking about domestic violence and what a evil crime it is and how hard it often is for the victims to escape. So let's talk a little bit about these systems. So what is the bureaucracy? What is the actual... This is the county child protective services, is that right?
Yeah, they're out here. They're called the Department of Children and Family Services, or DCFS.
For the county of San Bernardino.
Correct.
And this is their standard policy, is it?
I don't believe that it's policy, because I've dug and I've looked into their policies and procedures. And by all means, when there's a domestic violence situation, the protective actions of a parent are separation, obtaining a restraining order, calling police when the restraining order is violated. Those are the actions that police tell parents to do when they're in domestic violence situations, right? Separate from the person, get a restraining order, call when they, when or if they violate that restraining order.
So just to be clear, is this coming from a rogue social worker, or is it the philosophy of the department to pursue cases this way?
I'm not the only parent that's having this issue. So
in San Bernardino or across the state?
I am in support groups with parents from LA County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County. And the consensus is the same. Like it's a commonality within a lot of cases.
That the victims of domestic violence are blamed for the impact of the domestic violence on their children and for not protecting the children, and therefore the children are removed. You're saying that's common?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe it.
And, they're supposed to be offering these families pre-removal services, right? They have a big funding budget for pre-removal services. So, instead of removing the children, right? Because they've already, all the research is there. Like, removal is harmful. It's detrimental to children and families in general. So they have a budget for pre-removal services. They can have the kid home while mom, or the parent, goes through counseling, goes through the classes. There's no need for the separation, right? If the danger has been removed. But that's not what's happening. They're removing and then backfilling a story.
Maybe it's a sort of silly question. Who are the decision makers here? Are they women? Are they parents?
Some of the workers there seem too young to even have children. Some have openly stated they don't have children, because I've asked a few before. So I believe some do, some don't. There's male social workers. There's mostly female social workers. But with a young social worker, I don't believe they would even have the concept of understanding the process and what they're, putting parents through, and they could even make any kind of correct assessment about a child's well-being. Like how do you assess that? Like you don't have children, you took a class maybe to tell you about child developments, and then you get to base a recommendation off of that class that you learned something from, and make that recommendation to the judge. And then the judge, he co-signs on whatever the social workers say.
Just the inhumanity here, and the idea of separate. It's as a young baby, for goodness sake. I mean, there's so much evidence, science. And you don't need that, just your humanity. But if you want it, there's unbelievably robust science now establishing that those early years and attachment in those early years are so critical for a child's well-being. And what did you say? 7 weeks, 2 years. What were the ages?
8, I guess, 7 weeks, 2 years, 8 years, and 17.
Right. I mean, it's all terrible, but like particularly the really little ones. Total cluelessness. And, the idea that you're going to force this separation from the parent, the loving parent, to protect them when the actual physical threat is not even there anymore. I can't describe how shocking this is to me. And you're telling me this is common. Now, this is an absolute massive scandal, a massive, massive scandal. And that's why I wanted to bring this to my audience, and actually in my role as a candidate for governor, to say, this can't go on. We need to absolutely expose this and name and shame these monsters who are doing this. That's how I think of them, who could do this to you and to your children and to a family. And you're saying others? How many others? We need to know. I mean, this is a massive, massive scandal. I can't describe to you how strongly I feel about it and how much I appreciate you coming and talking about it. Because if we don't, it just keeps going on. And it sounds like it's going on. I mean, you've named 3 counties. I mean, we need to know, where else is this going on? And where's it coming from? Is there some ideology here at work? What's driving this? What do you think? Where's this coming from?
There's monetary value in removing a child from a home. So if you follow the numbers, you follow the money, and a lot of it comes from our Title 40 funding. They get bonuses. They get, with removal, there's a lot of money that goes into it. Every service they have to offer a parent or a child, it's more money. It's a bigger payment. Every kid they adopt out, it's an extra payment.
From who? Money from who to who? What's the money flow?
The federal government to the programs, to the social workers.
The federal government funds this stuff.
Correct.
Through what? Where's it? Do you know? I mean, we can dig.
It's the Title 40 funding. That big, huge pocket. I believe it's the same pocket of money that food stamps and the child care, subsidized child care. It all comes from the same pocket which you can, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's also the same pocket of our Social Security. So our Social Security benefits that go to, retired individuals once they get of retirement age, it's all out of the same pocket.
So you think that there's a financial gain to the bureaucracies that are doing these evil things? They're getting, it helps them grow their budget, and there's a financial incentive to do this, to do child separation. So all these people who went on and on about separating children at the border, they are now separating children in our communities for more money. That's really what you're saying.
That's what I believe. That's what the paperwork shows, and it makes sense. Just with just pure evilness of them separating families like this, like what else is there? Like you're just mean.
That's why my whole tone in this interview, just as when we first spoke, is just sheer disbelief, like true like what on earth could be going on here. That's why I asked the question about who these people are, because I generally don't have that attitude. I've never believed that in order to understand the importance of family and childhood and all these things, you have to be a parent. Of course not. You can have empathy
Right.
for people in a different situation than you. Of course, that's true. But like I can't imagine any parent doing this. I just can't. So this is coming from the bureaucracy within the county. Have you had any engagement with the political oversight, like the board of supervisors, anyone in a that is supposed to be your representative, the people's representatives overseeing these bureaucracies?
So, to my understanding, there's not a designated oversight body for the CPS department. So, if you, as far as in California, when we have to file complaints, follow that chain of command. We go internally to go to complaints within the department, right? But where do you go when the department wholly seems to be where your complaint is lying and it's not getting resolved, right? You're getting bumped up to a supervisor, to the next supervisor, and still nothing's being done. So, parents, including myself, have made complaints up to CDSS, the California Department of Social Services, to the county ombudsman, all the way up to the federal government, the DHS. And just from my complaints and from what I've heard from other parents, those complaints end up just getting kicked back down to the very same office that we're making complaints about.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. I mean, that's my experience of these bureaucracies. I wouldn't, that's why I'm asking about the political accountability here, because they are the people who are supposed to jump in when the bureaucracy is letting people down, or worse, in this case, attacking people. That's what this is, acting against their own people. So what about that? The county board of supervisors?
Right. So, yes, I have been engaging in civic engagement, right? So going to the local county board of supervisors out here in San Bernardino County, a group of us parents have been going every 2 weeks at their meetings and speaking out at their meetings, and just, we get our 3 minutes, sometimes it's 2 minutes, to speak up there about, whatever particular issue that we're bringing to the board, which is usually has to do with, we're requesting oversight, we're requesting reform, we're requesting change, we're bringing issues to light that are happening to us.
But not like someone to take up your individual case.
No, so the heads of the department of CPS, right? They're at these board meetings. And so when we parents get up there and talk, they then follow us out one by one and say, hey, can I get your name and your phone number, and I'm going to look into your case, right? This happened 3 times already, yet there's been no changes. And
well, they're insiders. What about your political representatives? I mean, I don't know, your assembly member, your state senator, the individual board of, not as going to a meeting as a member of the public, but like as a case, like members of Congress, they take casework. They're supposed to be there to help their constituents when they have a problem. Have you had any contact with an elected representative as an individual with a problem?
So we're still, I went down with another parent down to one of the assembly members' offices down here in San Bernardino to go speak with him personally, but we've just been met with back and forth emails, trying to make contacts, and got to speak with his, secretary that was going to relay the message. So nothing's happened on that front. At the Board of Supervisors meeting, there's the 5 board members. So we've talked to, Joe Baca Jr. is there, and then Al Menderes, Don Rowe. They did 2 meetings ago. They said that they have created an ad hoc committee to address the specific concerns that as parents keep bringing to their attention between us and the, CPS department. But that was a month and a half ago already, and we haven't heard a meeting set up or received any kind of details or otherwise regarding that. And at the last meeting last week, we did request like, hey, thank you for setting this up. We still haven't heard anything though.
So Andrea, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but I want you to know that I'm now on the case.
Okay.
I'm so shocked by this, and the fact that you're telling me that this is not isolated, it's potentially systemic. Certainly you have 2 other counties, 3 total, where this has been going on. I'm actually in touch with an organization of volunteers who are really fighting hard on the broader problems that we're seeing in the family court system with all of this in California. So you haven't heard the end of this from my end at all. And I don't know where we're going to go with it, but I'm just telling you, I am not going to let this drop. It's absolutely outrageous what's been done to you. And once again, I just thank you so so much for coming and sharing the story today. And let's stay in touch as we keep pushing on this. And as hopefully you the most important thing, that you're back together with your beautiful children as soon as possible.
That's the hope. Thank you so much for having me and taking the time out and meeting with me at the church and, hearing me out and, being at least somewhat, concerned. When we go and tell other people about this, sometimes it's not even a shock. It's not even, and you expect some kind of shock value from it. I'm shocked. I may be calm and sitting here cool, collected, but that's not what I'm feeling inside, right? That's definitely not what I'm feeling inside.
That's what I felt so strongly when we spoke. Your calmness and clarity, despite the rage that you must feel inside.
Yeah, it is, but I'm not gonna get, you catch more bees with honey, right? You can't just go attacking people. You have to be calm and collected to, and get a point across. If I start rambling about a bunch of stuff or what my own accusations of how everything is being run, people are gonna think that I'm crazy, so I have to, package it up and, not let it be a therapy session and just kind of concise bullet point, to the
Well, you've done
to
that
the point.
brilliantly.
Main thing.
That's exactly what
So,
you've done, and I really appreciate it. Andrea, let's stay in touch. We'll see each other soon. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a busy week in the campaign. You may have seen our first announcement at Cal Doge, our first fraud report, and there's much more to come along those lines. We've been very busy. We're stepping up the pace. It's going well. Town halls up and down the state, lots of people coming, hundreds of people at each event. Hope to see you at one of them. And if you want to support the campaign, of course, please join us at stevehiltonforgovernor.com. We'll be back next week, the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you soon.